Maggie Brennan's hands shook as she knelt in the snow outside Thunder Creek Ranch, her children's last breaths echoing in her mind. "Please," she choked out, gripping the frozen ground. "Take Clara and Ben. Feed them. I don't care what happens to me." Josiah McAllister stepped off his porch boots, crunching ice, his steel blue eyes locked on hers. The whole territory knew him as the man who never showed mercy. "Stand up," he said, voice low as thunder. She couldn't. Her legs had given out miles ago. Before we continue, if this story is already gripping your heart, hit that subscribe button right now. Stay until the very end to see how this impossible love story unfolds, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Maggie and Josiah's journey reaches across this country. Now let's ride. So, the morning Clara Brennan stopped pretending everything was fine. Frost covered the inside of the cabin windows like God's own indifference. Maggie woke to the sound of her daughter's coughing wet, rattling the kind that meant lungs were filling with something they shouldn't. She bolted upright on the thin mattress, her breath clouding the frigid air. "Mama," Clara's voice cracked. I can't get warm." 9 years old. Too young to sound like an old woman dying. Maggie threw off the threadbare quilt, the only one they had left, and stumbled across the cabin floor. Her bare feet hit wood so cold it burned. Clara lay curled beneath a horse blanket, shivering violently, her lips tinged blue. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Maggie pressed her palm to Clara's forehead, burning hot, ice cold, both at once. Beside Clara, 6-year-old Benjamin didn't move, didn't open his eyes. Maggie's heart stopped. "Ben," she shook his shoulder. "Benjamin, wake up." Nothing. "Ben," she shook harder, panic clawing up her throat. "Benjamin Thomas Brennan, you open your eyes right now." His eyelids fluttered, barely. "Mama." The word was nothing but breath. "I'm tired." No, you don't get to be tired. You hear me?" Maggie scooped him into her arms. His body was limp, light as kindling. "You stay awake. Both of you stay awake." She carried Ben to the fireplace. Dead ash. The last log had burned out sometime in the night, and she'd slept through it. Failed them while she slept. Her hands flew to the woodpile, empty. The corners of the cabin blurred, the floor tilted. "Mama?" Clara tried to sit up, collapsed back down. "Is Ben?" "He's fine. You're both fine." Maggie's voice didn't sound like her own. Too high. Too tight. "I'm going to fix this." She ran to the cupboard, threw open the doors. One jar. Cornmeal. Moldy. The drawer. Nothing. The trunk. Nothing. She spun in a circle, searching for something, anything. Her eyes landed on the knife block. Daniel's hunting knife, the good steel one, worth maybe $3. $3 wouldn't buy enough food to save 2 dying children. Clara coughed again, and this time blood dotted her palm. Maggie stopped breathing. 4 days ago, she'd walked 8 miles to town, begging at every door. Mrs. Henderson shut hers before Maggie finished speaking. "Mr. Foster said times were hard for everyone, ma'am. Can't help what I don't have." The general store owner, Mr. Pike, offered her 2 shriveled potatoes for $1. She had 17 cents. He took it. Gave her 1 potato. She'd made it last 4 days. Boiled it into broth so thin you could see through it. Rationed it between Clara and Ben in spoonfuls so small they cried for more. She hadn't eaten in 6 days herself. Yesterday, Ben fainted trying to carry in snow to melt for water. Today Clara was coughing blood. Tomorrow... No. Maggie pressed her fists against her eyes, forced herself to think through the hunger fog, through the fear. There was one person within 50 miles who had the power to save them. Josiah McAllister. The name alone made her stomach twist. She'd seen him exactly 3 times in the 18 months since Daniel died. Once at Sunday service, sitting alone in the back pew, leaving before the final hymn. Once riding through town, his black coat billowing behind him, ranch hands trailing like an army. Once at the general store buying supplies, paying in cash, the bills thick in his gloved hand. He never looked at anyone, never spoke unless spoken to, never smiled. They said he'd built Thunder Creek Ranch from nothing, 15 years of breaking his back and burying his heart. They said his wife died giving birth, and he'd never been the same. They said he'd forgotten how to be human. But they also said he was fair. Harsh, but fair. That he paid his debts and kept his word. And Daniel had saved one of his men. Maggie hadn't known until the funeral when a ranch hand named Tucker Hayes showed up, hat in his hands, tears in his eyes. "Your husband pulled me out of the Yellowstone River 3 winters back," Tucker said. "My horse, spooked on ice, went through into the current. I was drowning. Daniel rode in after me, nearly drowned himself. Mr. McAllister, don't forget things like that, ma'am. If you ever need anything." She'd nodded, barely hearing, too numb with grief. Now those words echoed. If you ever need anything. Thunder Creek Ranch was 12 miles north. Maggie looked down at her boots. The leather was cracked, held together with twine. Her dress hung off her shoulders 2 sizes too big now. Her hands shook constantly, whether from cold or hunger she couldn't tell anymore. 12 miles. In January. With a snowstorm building in the west. She looked at Clara, blood on her lips. At Ben, barely breathing. 12 miles wasn't impossible. Dying was. "Clara." Maggie knelt beside her daughter, brushed the damp hair off her forehead. "I need you to listen very carefully." Clara's eyes focused barely. "I'm going to get help. I'll be back before dark." "No." Clara grabbed her wrist fingers like bird bones. "Don't leave us. Mama, please." "Shh. Listen." Maggie gripped her daughter's hand. "You keep Ben warm. Put every blanket we have on him. Don't let him sleep too deep. Keep talking to him. Can you do that?" Clara's chin trembled. "What if you don't come back?" "I will." "Papa didn't." The words hit like a fist. Maggie closed her eyes, forced the grief down. Grief was a luxury. Grief could wait. "Your papa got thrown from a horse and hit his head," she said quietly. "I'm walking. I'll be careful. And I swear on my life, Clara Marie, I will come back for you." She kissed Clara's forehead, then Ben's. Ben didn't stir. Maggie stood before she could change her mind, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and walked out into the cold. The wind hit her like a slap. She gasped, pulling the shawl tighter, and started walking. North. Toward the mountains. Toward Thunder Creek. The sky was the color of old iron, heavy with snow that hadn't fallen yet. The land stretched flat and white in every direction, broken only by dead cottonwoods and fence posts half buried in drifts. Her boots crunched through the frozen crust. One step. Another. Another. Don't think about the distance. Don't think about the cold. Don't think about Clara's blood or Ben's stillness. Just walk. The first mile was numb determination. The second mile her toes went numb for real. Third mile she started talking to Daniel. "I'm going to McAllister," she said aloud, her breath fogging white. "I know you'd hate it, hate me begging. But I don't have a choice, Danny. I don't." The wind answered. "Tucker said he owes you. I'm going to collect." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry I couldn't keep the homestead. Sorry I couldn't keep the crops alive, couldn't keep the cow alive, couldn't—" She stumbled on a hidden rut, went down, hard on one knee. Pain shot up her leg. She bit down on a cry, tasted blood where she'd bitten her tongue. "Get up." She pushed herself upright, kept walking. Fourth mile, the shawl wasn't enough. The cold soaked through her dress, through her skin, settled into her bones. Her fingers went stiff. Her face burned, and then went numb. Fifth mile, she started praying. "God, I know I haven't been to church since the funeral. I know I cursed you when Daniel died. But if you're listening, if you care at all, please let McAllister help. I'll do anything. Anything. 6th mile, she stopped believing God was listening. 7th mile, she saw the smoke. Thin gray lines rising against the darker gray sky, still miles away, but visible. Thunder Creek Ranch. Her heart lurched. She walked faster. 8th mile. The snow started. Big fat flakes at first, drifting lazy, then smaller, meaner, driving sideways into her face. 9th mile, she couldn't feel her feet anymore. 10th mile, she fell twice. 11th mile, she couldn't remember why she was walking. Couldn't remember names or faces, just the vague sense that someone needed her somewhere. Then the wind shifted and she smelled it. Wood smoke. Horses. Hay. She lifted her head. Buildings. Fences. A barn, red paint bright against the white. Thunder Creek Ranch. She'd made it. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on a fence post, clung to it, forced herself to stay upright. A man's voice cut through the wind. "Hey, someone's at the fence." Footsteps, boots thudding toward her. Ma'am, you all right?" She tried to answer. Her mouth wouldn't work. Strong hands gripped her shoulders. "Jesus, she's half frozen. Get Mr. McAllister, now." The world tilted. She was being lifted, carried. "Stay with me, ma'am. We got you." She blinked, snow melting on her eyelashes. Faces swam above her. Ranch hands, all broad shoulders and worried eyes. Then one face sharpened. Steel blue eyes. Hard jaw. A scar cutting through one eyebrow. Josiah McAllister. "Put her down," he said. The hands hesitated. "Sir, she's—" "I said put her down." They set her on her feet. She swayed, locked her knees. Josiah stepped closer, studied her like a man evaluating a horse. No warmth, no recognition. "You got a name?" he asked. "Maggie." Her voice rasped. "Maggie Brennan." No reaction. "Daniel Brennan's widow." Something flickered in his eyes. "Brennan." "Yes, sir." He waited. She tried to remember the words she'd practiced. They'd all blown away in the wind. "I need—" She swallowed. "My children. They're dying." Josiah's expression didn't change. "I got no food, no firewood, no—" Her throat closed. "Please, I need help." "Why come to me?" "My husband saved your man. Tucker Hayes. 3 years back." Josiah's jaw tightened. "I remember." Hope flared. "Then you know I wouldn't ask if— What do you want?" The bluntness shocked her. "Food," she managed. "Just enough to—" "How many children?" "2. Clara's 9, Ben's 6. They haven't eaten in—" "Where's your homestead?" 7 miles southeast, past the cottonwood grove." "That's the old Brennan place, half collapsed." Shame burned through the cold. "Yes, sir." Josiah stared at her. The silence stretched so long she thought he'd refuse. Then he turned to the man beside him. Tucker Hayes, she realized. Older now, but the same kind eyes. "Tucker, get the wagon ready. 2 horses." Tucker's eyebrows shot up. "Sir." "You heard me." "Yes, sir." Tucker hurried off. Josiah looked back at Maggie. "You got any other family?" "No, sir." "The children sick?" "Clara's coughing blood. Ben won't wake up proper." His eyes narrowed. "How long since they ate?" 4 days. Real food, I mean." "And you—" She hesitated. "How long?" he repeated. 6 days. Josiah's mouth thinned. He shrugged out of his coat, draped it over her shoulders. The weight of it nearly knocked her over. Wool heavy, still warm from his body. "Sir, I can't—" "You want to help your kids. You don't die of cold before you get back to them." He turned toward the house. "Follow me." She stumbled after him, clutching the coat. He led her up the porch steps through a door into warmth so sudden it hurt. A large room opened before her. Fireplace roaring. Furniture that matched. rugs without holes. A woman in a gray dress. The housekeeper looked up sharply. "Esther," Josiah said, "get her food. Broth bread, nothing heavy." Esther's gaze swept over Maggie, cold and assessing. "Who is she?" "Widow, Daniel Brennan's wife." Esther's expression shifted slightly. "Brennan, the one who—" "Yeah." Josiah pulled out a chair at the table. "Sit." Maggie sat before her legs gave out. Esther disappeared into what must be the kitchen. Josiah stood by the firearms crossed, watching Maggie like she might bolt. "Your husband was a good man," he said finally, past tense, was. Maggie's throat burned. "Yes, sir. Tucker wouldn't be alive without him." She nodded. "I don't forget debts." Hope flared again, painful. Esther returned with a bowl of broth and half a loaf of bread. The smell hit Maggie like a fist. Her stomach cramped violently. "Slow," Josiah said. "You eat too fast, you'll be sick." She forced herself to pick up the spoon, sip the broth. Hot, rich salt and herbs and something like heaven. Tears spilled down her face. She ate slowly, each bite an agony of restraint when she wanted to shove it all in her mouth at once. Josiah watched in silence. When she finished, he spoke. "Tell me what happened." So she did. The fever that took Daniel. The failed crops. The dead livestock. The town's closed doors. The children's hunger. All of it spilled out in a voice that shook and broke and kept going because stopping meant falling apart completely. Josiah listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You walked 12 miles in a snowstorm to ask for food." "Yes, sir." "Why not send someone, ask the neighbors?" "Don't have neighbors anymore. The Hendersons moved east. The Fosters won't answer the door." "The church?" "Reverend Oakes gave me $1 last month. Said the collection's been thin." Josiah's mouth tightened. $1? It's more than nothing. It's an insult. Maggie looked down at her hands. "What were you planning?" Josiah asked. "I give you food, you walk back tonight." "Yes, sir." 12 miles in the dark in a blizzard. "My children will be dead before morning if their mother freezes to death halfway home." The bluntness of it stole her breath. "Here's what's going to happen," Josiah said. "We're taking the wagon to your place. We're getting your kids. We're bringing them here." Maggie's heart stopped. "Here. You got a problem with that. I know, but—" She struggled to understand. "For how long?" "Long as it takes." "Takes for what?" "For them to not be dying." Her mind spun. "Mr. McAllister, we can't impose." "You got a better option." She didn't. Then it's settled. He looked toward the door. "Tucker should have the wagon ready." "Sir." Maggie stood, legs shaking. "Why are you doing this?" Josiah met her eyes. "Your husband saved one of mine. I pay my debts." He paused. "And no child dies on my watch if I can stop it." Something in his voice made her think there was more to it. Something old and painful. But before she could ask, he was already heading for the door. "Come on, we're burning daylight." Mo. The wagon ride back felt like traveling through a dream. Maggie sat beside Josiah on the bench seat, wrapped in his coat and 2 extra blankets Esther had shoved at her. Tucker drove a second wagon behind them, loaded with supplies, food, blankets, medicine. Josiah handled the reins with easy competence, his eyes scanning the white landscape. They didn't speak. Maggie kept replaying his words. Long as it takes. What did that mean, days, weeks? And then what? They'd go back to the homestead, back to starving. She pushed the thought away. One crisis at a time. The snowstorm intensified. Wind howled, driving snow sideways. Josiah pulled his hat lower, kept the horses steady. "Almost there," he said, after what felt like hours. Maggie's heart lurched. The cottonwoods came into view, skeletal against the white. Then the cabin, dark, silent, snow piling against the door. Please, he whispered. Please let them be alive. Josiah pulled the wagon to a stop, jumped down. Maggie scrambled after him, nearly fell. He caught her elbow, steadied her. Easy. She pulled free, ran for the door. Clara, Ben. She shoved the door open. The cabin was ice. No fire, no light. Two small shapes huddled under blankets by the dead hearth. No, 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 no. Maggie fell to her knees beside them. Clara, Ben. Clara stirred. Mama. Relief hit so hard Maggie sobbed. I'm here, baby. I'm here. Behind her, Josiah and Tucker entered, bringing cold air and the smell of snow. Josiah knelt beside Maggie, pulled back Ben's blanket. The boy was barely breathing, his skin pale as wax. Jesus, Josiah muttered. He scooped Ben into his arms. Tucker, get the girl. We're leaving. Now. Tucker wrapped Clara in a blanket, lifted her carefully. Mama. Clara's voice was small, frightened. We're going somewhere warm, Maggie said, following Josiah out. Somewhere with food. You're going to be all right. She prayed she wasn't lying. They loaded the children into the wagon, packed blankets around them. The cabin, Maggie said. I need to leave it, Josiah said. But you planning to come back to this? Maggie looked at the sagging roof, the broken windows, the door that wouldn't close right. No, she whispered. Then leave it. He climbed onto the wagon seat. Maggie took one last look at the place where she'd lived with Daniel, where they'd dreamed of building a life. Then she climbed up beside Josiah and didn't look back. The return trip was slower, the storm worse. Josiah drove with grim focus, one hand on the reins, the other braced against the wind. Beside him, Maggie held Ben against her chest, willing warmth into his small body. Clara leaned against her side, shivering. Almost there, Josiah said again. This time, Maggie believed him. The lights of Thunder Creek appeared through the snow, golden and impossible. Ranch hands rushed out, helping unload the children. Get them inside, Josiah barked. Esther, heat water for baths, warm up the guest rooms. Esther appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. When she saw the children, her expression softened. Bring them to the kitchen, she said. It's warmest. They carried Clara and Ben inside. Maggie followed, numb with exhaustion and relief and disbelief. The kitchen was huge, warm, smelling of bread and stew. Esther directed them to set the children in chairs near the stove. Get those wet clothes off, she ordered, already gathering towels and blankets. Maggie's hands shook as she undressed Ben, revealing ribs sharp as knives, skin stretched thin. Esther's mouth tightened. She said nothing, just wrapped him in warm blankets and started spooning broth between his lips. Clara drank on her own small sips, eyes huge and wondering. Where are we? She whispered. Thunder Creek Ranch, Maggie said. Mr. McAllister's home. Clara looked at Josiah standing silent by the door. Why? Good question. Josiah's gaze moved from Clara to Ben to Maggie. Because you needed help, he said simply. And your pa once helped me. Clara frowned, not understanding. Josiah turned to leave. Mr. McAllister, Maggie said. He stopped. She didn't have words big enough for what she felt. Gratitude didn't cover it. Relief didn't cover it. Thank you, she managed. Josiah's expression didn't change. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. He walked out, boots heavy on the floor. Esther handed Maggie a cup of broth. Drink. Maggie drank. Around her, the kitchen bustled with activity. Ranch hands bringing in supplies. Esther heating more water. Clara and Ben slowly coming back to life under blankets and warmth and food. And for the first time in 18 months, Maggie Brennan let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd survive after all. Tag. Maggie woke to sunlight. Real sunlight streaming through glass windows that weren't cracked, warming a room that didn't smell like rot and desperation. For 3 heartbeats, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all crashed back, the walk through the snow. Josiah's steel blue eyes, the warmth of this house wrapping around her children like a promise. She bolted upright. The bed beneath her was soft, too soft. A real mattress with clean sheets and a quilt that didn't have holes. She was wearing a nightgown she didn't recognize, white cotton that smelled like lavender soap. Someone had undressed her, put her to bed. Heat flooded her face. She swung her legs over the side feet, touching a rug instead of frozen floorboards. Her clothes were gone. In their place, folded neatly on a chair, sat a dress. Not hers. Dark blue wool, simple but well made. The children. Panic spiked. She grabbed the dress, pulled it on. It fit loose in the waist, but the length was right, and yanked open the door. A hallway stretched before her, polished wood floors gleaming. Doors on either side all closed. Downstairs, voices drifted up. A woman's low murmur. A child's laugh. Maggie's heart lurched. She knew that laugh. She flew down the stairs, nearly tripped on the hem of the borrowed dress, caught herself on the banister. The kitchen. She burst through the door. Ben sat at the table, a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, his mouth full, his eyes bright. Clara beside him, eating slower but steady color in her cheeks that hadn't been there yesterday. Esther stood at the stove flipping flapjacks. She glanced over, raised an eyebrow. "Well, you're alive." Maggie couldn't speak, just stared at her children, whole and eating and not dying. "Mama?" Ben scrambled off his chair, ran to her. She dropped to her knees, caught him, buried her face in his hair. He smelled like soap, like he'd been bathed, fed, cared for. "You slept forever," Ben said, pulling back to look at her. "Miss Esther made eggs. Real eggs, Mama, and there's butter." Tears burned Maggie's eyes. "That's wonderful, baby." Clara stood slower, came to her mother. "Are you all right?" Maggie pulled her close too, felt Clara's thin arms wrap around her neck. "I'm fine. Her voice broke. "You're both all right." "We're good," Clara said quietly. "Miss Esther gave us baths and new clothes and—" She hesitated. "Is this real, Mama? Or are we dreaming?" "It's real." "But why would Mr. McAllister?" "Because your father saved a man's life once," Maggie said. "And Mr. McAllister pays his debts." Clara frowned, not quite satisfied with that answer, but Ben was already tugging her toward the table. "Come eat, Mama. There's so much food." Esther pointed a spatula at an empty chair. "Sit. You need food more than they do." Maggie sat, and a plate appeared in front of her. Eggs, bacon, toast, jam. More food than she'd seen in months. Her hands shook as she picked up the fork. Esther watched her like a hawk. "Slow. You remember what Mr. McAllister said." Maggie ate slowly, each bite an exercise in control. Her stomach cramped, protesting the sudden richness, but she forced it down. "Where is Mr. McAllister?" she asked between bites. "Out with the hands. Winter feeding." Esther poured coffee into a thick mug, set it in front of Maggie. "He'll be back before noon." Maggie wrapped her hands around the mug, let the heat soak into her palms. "Miss Esther," she said carefully, "how long can we stay?" Esther's expression didn't change. "That's between you and Mr. McAllister." "But surely he doesn't mean for us to—" "I don't speak for him." Esther turned back to the stove. "You want answers? You ask him yourself." Clara and Ben exchanged glances. "Are we in trouble?" Ben whispered. "No, sweetheart." Maggie smoothed his hair. "We're just guests." "Mr. McAllister saved us," Clara said. Her voice had an edge Maggie didn't like. Too much understanding for a 9-year-old. "But guests leave, don't they?" Before Maggie could answer, the back door swung open. Cold air rushed in, and with it 2 men. Tucker Hayes, stamping snow off his boots, grinning. And Josiah. He filled the doorway without trying, snow dusting his dark coat hat in his hands. His eyes swept the room, landing on Maggie. She stood instinctively, smoothing the borrowed dress. "Mr. McAllister." He nodded. "Mrs. Brennan." His gaze moved to the children. You two feeling better? Ben nodded enthusiastically. Clara just stared. Good. Josiah hung his hat and coat on a peg by the door. Esther, coffee. Already poured. Esther set a mug on the table. Josiah sat and the whole room seemed to shift around him. He drank his coffee black, his eyes on Maggie. We need to talk, he said. Her stomach clenched. Yes, sir. Not here. He glanced at the children. Tucker, take the kids to the barn. Show them the horses. Tucker brightened. Yes, sir. Come on, you two. Ever seen a Mustang up close? Ben's eyes went wide. Clara hesitated, looking at her mother. It's all right, Maggie said softly. Go on. Clara took Ben's hand, followed Tucker out. The door closed behind them. Silence settled thick and heavy. Esther refilled Josiah's coffee, then disappeared into the pantry, giving them space without leaving entirely. Josiah set down his mug. Your homestead's not salvageable, he said bluntly. Roof's half-caved, foundations rotting. Even if you had money to fix it, you'd be throwing good after bad. Maggie's throat tightened. I know. You got any other property, family land? No, sir. Daniel's parents passed before we married. Mine too. Savings? She almost laughed. No. Skills? The question surprised her. I can cook, so I kept books for Daniel, managed the homestead accounts when we had accounts to manage. Josiah nodded slowly. You ever work for anyone else? Hired hand domestic work? Heat crept up her neck. No, sir. I was married at 16. Went straight from my father's house to Daniel's. So you got 2 children, no home, no money, and no work experience. Put like that, it sounded hopeless. Yes, sir. Josiah leaned back, studying her. What were you planning to do after I gave you food? Go back to that cabin and wait to starve slower? The bluntness stung. I don't know. I hadn't thought past keeping them alive another day. Well, start thinking past it now. He crossed his arms. Because here's your situation. That homestead's done. The land's not worth the back taxes you probably owe. Even if you sold it, you'd get pennies. Not enough to start over anywhere. Maggie's hands twisted in her lap. I know. Town won't help. Church won't help. You already learned that. Yes. So, what's your plan? She looked up, met his eyes. I don't have one. Then I'll give you one. Her breath caught. You and your kids stay here, Josiah said. You work for your keep. Esther's getting older, needs help with the house. Cooking, cleaning, mending. You do that. I pay you a wage, room and board included. Maggie stared. You're offering me a job. You got a problem with that. I know, but... She struggled to understand. Why? Because you need one. Because your kids need a roof that doesn't leak and food that doesn't grow mold. Because... He stopped, jaw tightening. Because what? His eyes went distant. Because I know what it's like to watch someone die when you can't stop it. And I can stop this. The pain in his voice was brief, quickly buried, but she heard it. Your wife, Maggie said quietly. Josiah's expression went hard. That's not your concern. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Do you want the job or not? She wanted to ask more to understand this man who hid grief behind steel, but his eyes warned her not to push. Yes, she said. Yes, I want the job. Good. You start today. Esther will show you what needs doing. He stood. One more thing. Sir, people in town are going to talk. Widow and her kids living at a single man's ranch. You understand that. Heat flooded her face. I understand. You care what they say. She thought of Mrs. Henderson's slammed door, Mr. Foster's empty excuses, the church's $1. No, sir, I don't. Something almost like approval flickered in his eyes. Good, because I don't either. He grabbed his hat, headed for the door. Mr. McAllister? He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Thank you," Maggie said. "For everything. I'll work hard. I promise I won't." "I know you will." He looked back at her. "Your husband was a good man. Died too young. Left you in a bad spot through no fault of your own. That's not right. So I'm making it right. That's all this is." But the way he said it made her think it wasn't all, that there was more he wasn't saying. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him. Esther emerged from the pantry, arms full of linens. "Well," she said, "looks like you're staying." Maggie nodded, still dazed. "Then let's get to work. These sheets need changing, and supper won't cook itself." The first week passed in a blur of work. Maggie learned the rhythms of Thunder Creek Ranch the way the house woke before dawn with the sounds of men heading to the barns, horses nickering the stove being stoked to life. She learned where everything lived: the good china in the hutch, the mending basket by the parlor window, the root cellar stocked with enough food to feed an army. She learned Esther's ways. The older woman was exacting, sharp-tongued, but fair. She showed Maggie once how she wanted something done, then expected it done that way every time. "Mr. McAllister don't tolerate sloppy," Esther said, demonstrating how to fold sheets with hospital corners. "You do it right or you do it over." Maggie did it right. She scrubbed floors, beat rugs, kneaded bread dough until her arms ached. She mended shirts and socks, patched holes in work pants, took in a coat that had belonged to Josiah's father. She peeled potatoes and carrots, plucked chickens, churned butter. It was hard work, honest work. And for the first time in 18 months, she didn't go to bed hungry. Clara and Ben thrived. Color returned to their cheeks, flesh to their bones. Ben followed Tucker around like a shadow, learning about horses and cattle, and how to mend a fence. Clara helped in the kitchen, quiet but observant, her eyes always watching. Josiah remained distant. He took breakfast alone in his office, spent days out on the range, returned after dark, smelling like leather and cold wind. When he did speak to Maggie, it was brief, practical. "We need more firewood brought up from the shed." "Yes, sir." "Esther says the upstairs window's sticking. I'll fix it tomorrow." "Thank you, sir." Always sir. Always a wall between them. But sometimes she'd catch him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. And once when Ben ran up to show him a rock he'd found. Josiah knelt down to examine it with the seriousness of a man appraising gold. "That's a good one," he said. "See the quartz? That means there might be more nearby." Ben's face glowed. Maggie's heart twisted. On the 8th day, Reverend Oakes came to visit. Maggie was beating rugs on the back porch when she heard the wagon. She looked up, saw the Reverend climbing down his black coat, stark against the snow. Esther appeared in the doorway. "Reverend, what brings you out here?" "Heard there's a widow and her children staying at Thunder Creek." His voice was kind, but his eyes were sharp. "Thought I'd check on their welfare." "They're fine," Esther said flatly. "I'd like to see for myself if you don't mind." Maggie set down the rug, beater came forward. "Reverend Oakes?" His expression softened. "Mrs. Brennan, I've been worried about you. When you didn't come to town for weeks." "We were starving," Maggie said bluntly. "I came here because Mr. McAllister was the only one who'd help." The Reverend flinched. "If I'd known it was that bad..." "You gave me $1 and said the collection was thin. I told you my children were hungry." "Yes, but I didn't realize." "Didn't realize we were dying, or didn't want to." Silence. The Reverend cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brennan, I understand you're grateful to Mr. McAllister, but people are talking. A young widow living alone with a single man." "I'm not living alone with him," Maggie said coldly. "I'm working for him, earning wages. Esther's here. Ranch hands are here. It's more proper than starving to death in a collapsing cabin." "I'm not questioning your morals." "Yes, you are." Reverend Oakes's mouth thinned. "I'm trying to protect your reputation." My reputation didn't feed my children. Mr. McAllister did. Hoofbeats interrupted them. Josiah rode up, dismounted smoothly. His eyes went from Maggie to the Reverend, and something dangerous flickered in them. "Reverend," he said, "you got business here." "I came to check on Mrs. Brennan and her children." "They're fine." "So I see." The Reverend straightened. "Mr. McAllister, I mean no offense, but the optics of this situation." "The optics?" Josiah's voice went soft, deadly. "You mean people talking?" "Well, yes." "Let them." Josiah stepped closer. "Mrs. Brennan works for me. Her children are safe fed and warm. If the good people of Willow Springs have a problem with that, they can come say it to my face." The Reverend paled. "I'm not suggesting—" "Yes, you are. You're suggesting I'd take advantage of a widow in a desperate situation. That's what you're implying." "No, because if that's what you think, Reverend, you don't know me at all." The two men stared at each other. Finally, Reverend Oakes stepped back. "I apologize. I overstepped." "Yes, you did. I'll be going." He glanced at Maggie. "Mrs. Brennan, if you ever need anything—" "I know where to find you," Maggie said. Her voice was ice. The Reverend left. Silence settled over the porch. "You all right?" Josiah asked quietly. Maggie realized her hands were shaking. "Yes." "He's not wrong about the talk." "I don't care." "You will. Eventually." She looked at him. "Will you—" His jaw tightened. "No." "Then neither will I." Something shifted in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or surprise. "Good," he said. Then he walked past her into the house. Maggie stood on the porch, heart pounding, and realized she'd just drawn a line in the snow. There was no going back now. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became a month. January bled into February. The snow deepened, the cold intensified, but inside Thunder Creek Ranch, life settled into rhythms that felt almost normal. Maggie rose before dawn, started the fires, put coffee on. Esther joined her, and together they made breakfast for the ranch hands: flapjacks, eggs, bacon, biscuits with gravy. The men ate in the bunkhouse, but Josiah took his plate in the kitchen, now sitting at the table with the children, while Maggie and Esther worked. He didn't talk much, but he listened. To Ben's chatter about the horses, to Clara's careful questions about the ranch's finances. "How many head of cattle do you run?" Clara asked one morning. Josiah glanced at her, surprised. "Around 800. Why?" "Just wondering. Papa used to say you can tell a ranch's health by its herd size." "Your papa was right." Josiah cut his bacon. "We're doing well this year. Lost fewer calves than expected." "Because of the new barn?" Clara asked. "Partly. And the windbreaks we built last fall." Clara nodded, filing that information away like a little accountant. Josiah's lips twitched. Almost a smile. Maggie watched from the stove, something warm unfurling in her chest. After breakfast, the children had lessons. Esther pulled out old school books from when Josiah's younger sister had lived here before she married and moved east. Clara devoured them. Ben struggled with reading, but loved arithmetic. Josiah sometimes helped in the evenings, sitting at the table with Ben patiently sounding out words. C-A-T, cat. Good. Next word. D-O-G, dog. That's right. Maggie mended shirts by the fire, listening her heart, doing complicated things she didn't want to examine too closely. One night after the children went to bed, she found Josiah in his office, ledgers spread before him. She knocked on the doorframe. "Sir." He looked up, tiredness in his eyes. "Something wrong?" "No, I just—" She hesitated. "I wanted to ask about my wages. You said you'd pay me, but we haven't discussed $2 a week, room and board included. Fair? More than fair. Most housekeepers made half that. That's very generous." You work hard, you're worth it. He set down his pen. Something else. I want to save it, every penny. So when... She stopped. When you leave... The words hung between them. I don't want to be a burden, Maggie said quietly. You've already done so much. Josiah leaned back in his chair. You think you're a burden. I think you took us in out of obligation, because of Daniel. And I'm grateful, but... Stop. She stopped. Josiah came around the desk. You're not here out of obligation anymore. Then why? He was close enough now that she could see the gray threading his dark hair, the lines around his eyes, from years of squinting against the sun. Because you belong here, he said simply. Her breath caught. Your kids are happy. Clara's learning. Ben's gaining weight. He paused. You're good for this house. Good for Esther. Good for... He didn't finish. Maggie's heart thundered. Good for you. His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw past the steel, saw loneliness, saw hunger for something he'd denied himself for years. Yeah, he said quietly. Good for me. Neither of them moved. Then footsteps sounded in the hall, and Esther's voice called, Mr. McAllister, one of the hands needs you in the barn. The moment shattered. Josiah stepped back, grabbed his coat. We'll talk more later. He left. Maggie stood in his office, touching her face, feeling heat there that had nothing to do with the fire. March came with a thaw. Snow began to melt, revealing dead grass and mud. The river broke free of ice with sounds like cannon fire. Calving season started, and Josiah spent long hours in the barns, helping bring new life into the world. Maggie brought him coffee at midnight, found him covered in blood and straw holding a newborn calf. This one's mother rejected him, Josiah said. Have to bottle feed. Maggie knelt beside him. The calf was tiny, wet, trembling. Will he make it? If he fights? She watched Josiah's hands, large and scarred, gentle the calf into a blanket. You're good at this, she said. Had a lot of practice. Your wife, did she help with calving? Josiah went still. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Sarah hated the blood, but she'd stay up with me anyway, keep me company, read to me while I worked. What did she read? Shakespeare. She loved the tragedies. His voice was distant. Said they made sense to her. The idea that loving someone could destroy you. Maggie's throat tightened. Did it destroy you? Josiah looked at her. Almost. But you survived. Surviving's not the same as living. No, Maggie agreed softly. It's not. They stayed there in the barn with the calf between them and years of grief heavy in the air. I think about Daniel every day, Maggie said. But the pain's different now. Less sharp. More like an ache. Does that feel like betrayal? Sometimes. She touched the calf's soft nose. Does it for you? Josiah was quiet for a long time. It did, he finally said. For years. Felt like moving on would mean forgetting her. Dishonoring what we had. And now... He looked at her, and the weight of his gaze made her shiver. Now I think Sarah would want me to be happy, even if it meant letting her go. The air between them charged with something unnamed. Josiah, Maggie whispered. His name, not his title. For the first time. He leaned closer. The barn door banged open. Boss? Tucker's voice urgent. Got a breech berth in the south pasture. Need you now. Josiah closed his eyes briefly, then stood. On my way. He left without looking back. Maggie stayed with the calf, her heart racing, and wondered what would have happened if Tucker hadn't interrupted. Wondered if she wanted to know. April brought Victor Slate. The neighboring rancher rode up one afternoon flanked by two of his men, his eyes cold and calculating. Maggie was hanging laundry when she saw them. Something about the way Slate looked at the house made her skin crawl. Josiah came out to meet them, his stance easy, but his hand close to the rifle on his saddle. Slate. Callister. Slate's smile didn't reach his eyes. Heard you've taken in a widow. Charitable of you. What do you want? Just being neighborly. Thought I'd check on Mrs. Brennan myself. Make sure she's being treated proper. She's fine. I'd like to hear that from her. Slate's gaze found Maggie. Ma'am, you being treated well here? Maggie stepped forward, chin high. Mr. McAllister has been nothing but kind. Kind. Slate's smile widened. That what we're calling it? Josiah moved faster than Maggie had ever seen him move. One moment he was on his horse, the next he was dragging Slate down, slamming him against the fence. Say that again, Josiah growled. Slate's men reached for their guns. Tucker and 3 other ranch hands appeared from the barn rifles ready. I'd think real careful about your next move, Tucker said calmly. Slate's men froze. Slate laughed breathless. Easy, McAllister. Just making conversation. No, you're making accusations. About a woman who's done nothing but try to survive. Josiah's grip tightened. You got something to say about how I run my ranch, you say it. You want to insult Mrs. Brennan, you'll answer to me. All right, all right. Slate held up his hands. No offense meant. Josiah shoved him back. Get off my land. Slate straightened his coat, still smiling. Enjoy your charity work, McAllister. But don't be surprised when it costs you your reputation. He mounted his horse, rode off with his men. Silence settled. Josiah turned to Maggie. You all right? She was shaking. Yes. He won't bother you again. How do you know? Because I'll kill him if he does. He said it so matter-of-factly that she believed him. That night Clara came to Maggie's room. Mama, are we causing trouble for Mr. McAllister? Maggie set down her mending. Why would you think that? I heard what that man said, about us being here. Clara, maybe we should leave, before we make things worse. Maggie pulled her daughter close. Mr. McAllister wants us here, and we're staying as long as he'll have us. But what if people keep talking? Then they talk. Maggie smoothed Clara's hair. Baby, I spent 18 months caring what people thought. It didn't keep you fed. It didn't keep us warm. Mr. McAllister did. So let them talk. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then, do you love him, Mama? The question stole Maggie's breath. That's not... Because he looks at you the way Papa used to. And you look at him the same way. Maggie's heart hammered. It's complicated. Grown-ups always say that when the answer is yes. From the mouths of babes. Maggie kissed Clara's forehead. Get some sleep. After Clara left, Maggie stood at her window looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. Down in the yard, Josiah stood alone smoking a cigarette, his face turned toward her window. Their eyes met across the distance. Neither looked away, and Maggie knew with certainty that terrified and thrilled her that Clara was right. This was complicated, and the answer was yes. The next morning, Josiah didn't come to breakfast. Maggie tried not to notice the empty chair, tried not to feel the weight of his absence like a stone in her chest. She served Ben and Clara, their eggs poured coffee for Esther, kept her hands busy, so her mind wouldn't wander to that moment at the window, to the way he'd looked at her in the moonlight. Mr. McAllister left before dawn, Esther said, not looking up from her biscuits. Took Tucker and headed north. Won't be back till tomorrow. Oh, Maggie's voice came out too casual. Ranch business. Always is. Esther's eyes flickered to her sharp and knowing. Man works himself half to death to avoid thinking too much. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't. Esther dumped flour into a bowl. You're both fools, you know that. Maggie's cheeks burned. Esther. Don't Esther me. I got eyes. I see how he looks at you when you're not watching. How you look at him when he's not watching. Like two people drowning who won't reach for each other because they're afraid of pulling the other one under. It's not like that. Then what's it like? Maggie set down the coffee pot, gripped the counter. He's my employer. I work for him. That's all. That all it is? That's all it can be. Esther snorted. Because of what people will say, people already talking, girl. Might as well give them something real to talk about. I can't. Maggie's voice cracked. Daniel's only been gone 18 months, and Josiah, he's still grieving his wife. We're broken people trying to survive. That's not love. That's desperation. You think love can't grow from desperation? Esther's hand stilled in the flour. My husband found me half dead from cholera, nursed me back to health. I married him 3 months later, had 42 years together before the pneumonia took him. Don't you tell me desperation can't turn into love. Maggie's throat tightened. I'm scared. Of what? Of dishonoring Daniel's memory. Of making a mistake. She stopped. Of being happy. Esther asked quietly. The words hit like a fist. Maggie had been surviving for so long she'd forgotten what happiness even felt like. The idea of reaching for it felt selfish, felt wrong, felt like betraying every promise she'd made at Daniel's grave. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Esther came around the counter, gripped Maggie's shoulders. Then figure it out. Because that man out there, he's been half alive for 8 years, and you've been half alive since your husband died. Maybe it's time you both started living again. Before Maggie could answer, the door burst open. Clara stood there wild-eyed. Mama, Ben's gone. Everything else vanished. What do you mean gone? He was in the barn with me helping with the calf, and then I turned around and he wasn't there. I looked everywhere, Mama. I can't find him. Maggie was already moving, grabbing her shawl, running for the door. The barn was empty except for the calf in its pen, bleeding softly. Maggie spun in a circle, heart hammering. Benjamin. Nothing. She ran outside, Clara beside her. When did you see him last? Maybe 10 minutes ago. He said he wanted to show the calf to the horses in the south pasture. The south pasture, a quarter-mile away past the creek. The creek that was running high and fast with snowmelt. Maggie's blood went cold. Get the ranch hands, she told Clara. Now. Clara ran. Maggie bolted toward the south pasture, her skirts tangling around her legs, her breath coming in gasps. She cleared the barn. The corral hit the path that led down to the creek. And heard it. A child's scream, high and terrified. Mama! She ran faster, lungs burning, and burst through the cottonwoods. The creek churned below, swollen and angry. And there, clinging to a fallen log in the middle of the current, was Ben. Hold on! Maggie screamed. Baby, hold on! Mama, I'm slipping! The log shifted. Ben's fingers scrabbled at the bark. Maggie didn't think. She kicked off her boots, waded into the water. The cold hit like knives. The current grabbed her, tried to pull her under. She fought it, pushing toward Ben, the water rising to her waist, her chest. I'm coming, Ben. Don't let go. Behind her, voices shouted, ranch hands running toward the creek, but they were too far. She was closer. The current slammed into her, knocked her off her feet. Water closed over her head. She surfaced, gasping, reached for the log. Her fingers found wood. She pulled herself up, got her arm around Ben. I got you. I got you. Mama, I'm scared. The log broke free. They went under. Water filled Maggie's mouth, her nose, her lungs. She kicked, pulled Ben against her chest, fought for the surface. Her head broke through. She gasped air, saw the bank too far, moving too fast. Rocks ahead, jagged and deadly. She twisted her body, took the impact on her shoulder. Pain exploded. She held Ben tighter, kept his head above water. Breathe, baby, breathe. Something hit her from behind. Arms strong and sure wrapped around both of them. Tucker's voice in her ear. I got you, ma'am. Don't fight me. Another set of hands grabbed Ben, pulled him toward the shore. Maggie's strength gave out. She went limp. Let Tucker drag her through the current. Felt rocks scrape her legs, her arms. Then solid ground, hands lifting her. Voices everywhere. She rolled onto her side, vomited creek water, coughed until her ribs screamed. Ben! She choked out. Where's... Here, Mama. His small voice terrified but alive. She crawled to him, pulled him into her arms, felt his heart hammering against hers. You're all right. You're all right. I'm sorry, Mama. I just wanted to see the horses and I slipped and... Shh. It's okay. You're safe. Tucker knelt beside them, breathing hard. Ma'am, you damn near killed yourself. He's my son. Her voice shook. I'd do it again. I know you would. Tucker's eyes were bright with something between respect and fear. But next time, wait for help. Mr. McAllister would have had my hide if anything happened to you. The mention of Josiah made her chest tighten. Don't tell him, she said. Tucker stared. Ma'am, with respect, that's impossible. Half the hands saw what happened. Word's going to reach him before he's 5 miles back. Maggie closed her eyes. Of course it would. They helped her back to the house, Ben wrapped in blankets, Maggie dripping and shaking. Esther took one look at them and started barking orders. Hot water, now, and send someone to find Mr. McAllister. Tell him there's been an accident, but everyone's alive. No, Maggie said. He's got business. He'll want to know. Esther's voice was iron. And if you think otherwise, you don't know that man at all. They stripped Ben, wrapped him in blankets, gave him hot tea with honey. His teeth chattered, but he was whole. No broken bones. No water in his lungs. Maggie sat by the fire wrapped in one of Josiah's old coats that Esther had shoved at her and tried to stop shaking. Clara curled against her side. I'm sorry, Mama. I should have watched him better. This isn't your fault, baby. But if I'd been paying attention, Ben's 6. 6-year-olds wander. It happens. Maggie kissed the top of her head. No one's to blame. Except maybe her for not watching close enough, for being distracted thinking about Josiah instead of keeping her children safe. The guilt sat heavy. Hours passed. The sun dipped toward the western mountains. Ben fell asleep in Esther's rocking chair, exhausted from fear and cold. Maggie couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, just sat by the window waiting. Full dark had fallen when hoofbeats thundered into the yard. She stood hard in her throat. The door slammed open. Josiah filled the doorway chest, heaving eyes wild. His gaze swept the room, landed on Ben, sleeping, then on Maggie. You're alive. I'm fine. He crossed the room in 3 strides, gripped her shoulders. Tucker said you went into the creek, said you nearly drowned. Ben was drowning. I had to... You could have died. His hands tightened. You could have died, Maggie. Her name. Not Mrs. Brennan. Maggie. But I didn't. You went into a flooded creek in April. The current, the rocks... His voice broke. Do you have any idea what could have happened? I saved my son. You almost killed yourself doing it. What was I supposed to do? Stand there and watch him drown? You were supposed to wait for help. He was shaking now, his control shattering. You were supposed to... He stopped, pulled her against his chest. Maggie froze, shocked by the embrace, by the way his arms wrapped around her, like he was trying to keep her from disappearing. Don't ever do that again, he said into her hair. Don't ever scare me like that again. Her heart thundered against his. Josiah. I rode 15 miles in 2 hours because I thought... He pulled back just enough to look at her, and the naked fear in his eyes stole her breath. I thought I'd lost you. You barely know me. I know enough. This is we can't. Why not? Because Daniel had only been dead 18 months. Because Josiah's wife had been dead 8 years and he'd never moved on. Because people would talk and judge and condemn. Because she was terrified of wanting something this much. "Because I'm not ready," she whispered. Something in his eyes dimmed. He stepped back, releasing her. "All right. Josiah." "No. You're right." His voice went flat, controlled again. "I overstepped. It won't happen again." He turned toward the door. "Wait." The word burst out before she could stop it. "That's not what I meant." He stopped but didn't turn around. Maggie's hands twisted in the coat. I need time to figure out what this is, what I'm feeling. I can't." Her voice cracked. "I buried my husband 18 months ago. And you loved your wife. Still love her, maybe. And I don't know if what we're feeling is real, or if we're just two lonely people trying to fill a void." "You think that's what this is?" He turned, and the look in his eyes was scorching. "A void I'm trying to fill. I don't know what this is." "Then let me tell you." He moved closer, and she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "I loved Sarah, loved her with everything I had. And when she died, I buried that part of myself with her. Told myself I'd never feel that way again. Didn't want to. Couldn't survive losing it twice." Maggie's breath caught. "Then you showed up," Josiah continued. "Half frozen, half starved, offering to give up your children to save their lives. And something in me, something I thought was dead, woke up. You scare the hell out of me, Maggie. Because I haven't felt this alive in 8 years." Tears burned her eyes. "I scare myself." "Good. Then we're even." He reached out, cupped her face with one rough hand. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to forget Daniel. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you don't feel something when I walk into a room." "I'm not pretending." "Then what do you call it?" "Surviving," she whispered. "I'm trying to survive without wanting too much, without hoping too hard. Because every time I've hoped for something, it's been ripped away." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I can't promise you won't get hurt. Can't promise this will work. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to make it work. If you'll let me." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Every logical part of her brain screamed to step back to keep the walls up to protect herself. But her heart, her traitorous, hungry heart, wanted to leap. "I need time," she said again. "How much?" "I don't know." "Then I'll wait." He lowered his hand. "But Maggie, I'm not waiting forever. Life's too short and too hard to waste on fear." He left. Maggie stood alone by the fire, shaking for entirely different reasons now, and wondered if she was brave enough to risk her heart again. The answer terrified her, because it was yes. The days that followed were strange and taut, like a wire pulled too tight, vibrating with tension that nobody acknowledged but everyone felt. Josiah kept his distance, polite, professional. He took meals in his office again, spoke to Maggie only when necessary, and when their eyes met across a room, he looked away first. It should have been easier. It wasn't. Maggie found herself listening for his footsteps, watching the window for his return from the range, aching for glimpses of him that she told herself she didn't need. Ben recovered quickly, the resilience of children making the creek incident just another adventure to recount to Tucker. But Clara watched her mother with knowing eyes, saying nothing but seeing everything. "You're sad," she said one night as Maggie tucked her in. "I'm fine, baby. You look at Mr. McAllister the way you used to look at Papa." Maggie's hands stilled on the blanket. "Clara." "I'm not mad, Mama. Papa's gone. He's not coming back." Clara's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes glistened. "And Mr. McAllister's nice. He helped us when no one else would. If you wanted to..." "Wanted to what?" Clara's jaw set. "If you wanted to be happy, I wouldn't mind." The words cracked something open in Maggie's chest. "Oh, baby." She pulled Clara close. "When did you grow up so much?" When we were starving and you pretended everything was fine so we wouldn't be scared. Clara's voice muffled against her shoulder. I know what you gave up for us, Mama. I know you walked through that blizzard even though you were dying too. So if Mr. McAllister makes you happy, you should let him. Maggie couldn't speak past that night. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, Clara's words echoing. If he makes you happy, you should let him. When had she stopped believing she deserved happiness? When Daniel died. Before that, when the crops failed and she watched her children go hungry. Or even earlier when she was 16 and married a man because it was expected. Not because she'd chosen it. She'd loved Daniel. Truly loved him. But their marriage had been born of duty and grown into affection, not the wild, desperate thing that seemed to burn between her and Josiah. This felt different, dangerous, like touching lightning. And maybe that's what scared her most. 3 days after the creek incident, Victor Slate rode onto Thunder Creek land again. Maggie was in the garden pulling early weeds when she heard the horses. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun. Slate and 4 of his men, all armed. Ice slid down her spine. She started toward the house, but Slate spurred his horse, cutting her off. Mrs. Brennan, heard about your little accident at the creek. She said nothing, looking past him toward the barn. Where were the ranch hands? Must have been terrifying. Slate continued, his smile cold. Helpless widow, drowning child. Good thing McAllister's men were there to save you. What do you want, Mr. Slate? Just checking on your welfare, making sure McAllister's taking proper care of you. He is. Now if you'll excuse me. Slate's horse sidestepped, blocking her path again. You know, Mrs. Brennan, there's talk in town. About you and McAllister. About what a widow's really doing living at a single man's ranch. Heat flooded her face. That's none of your concern. Oh, but it is. See, I got a proposition for you. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Slate leaned down from his saddle. You come work for me instead. Proper job, proper wages. Separate housing for you and your children. All very respectable. Save your reputation before McAllister ruins it completely. Mr. McAllister has done nothing but help me. Sure he has. Out of the goodness of his heart, right? Slate's smile widened. You're not that naive, Mrs. Brennan. Men don't take in pretty widows for charity. They do it because they want something. Fury burned through her fear. You're disgusting. I'm honest, and my offer stands. Work for me, and I'll make sure no one questions your virtue. Get off this land. Or what you'll tell McAllister. Slate laughed. He's not even here, so I'm riding north this morning. Won't be back till dark. Behind Slate, his men shifted hands, drifting toward their guns. Maggie's heart hammered. She was alone. Esther was in town buying supplies. The children were inside. The nearest ranch hand was a rifle cocked. Everyone froze. Step away from her. Tucker stood 20 feet away, rifle leveled at Slate's chest. Behind him, 3 more hands emerged from the barn, all armed. Easy now, Slate said, raising his hands. Just having a conversation. Conversation's over. Tucker's voice was deadly calm. You got 3 seconds to get off this property before I put a bullet in you. McAllister's not here to protect you, Hayes. Don't need him. 1. Slate's jaw tightened. 2. This ain't finished. 3. Slate yanked his reins, wheeled his horse around. Let's go. He rode off, his men following. Tucker kept the rifle raised until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he lowered it, turned to Maggie. You all right, ma'am? She realized she was shaking. Yes, thank you. What did he want? To make trouble. Her voice steadied. Tucker, where were you, I thought? We saw them coming. Boss's orders are to never leave you alone if Slate shows up, so we stayed close out of sight, waiting to see what he'd do. Tucker's eyes were hard. He made his move. Now we know. Know what? That he's not just talk. He's planning something. Fear spiked. Should we tell Josiah? Already sent a rider. He'll be back within the hour. Maggie nodded, tried to slow her racing heart. Tucker hesitated. Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, Slate's right about one thing. You being here, it's causing talk. And talk can turn into action. Might be safer if I left. She lifted her chin. Is that what you think I should do? No, ma'am, I think you should stay. But I also think you and the boss need to figure out what this is before someone gets hurt. What this is? Tucker gave her a look. Ma'am, I ain't blind. Neither is anyone else on this ranch. We see how he looks at you, how you look at him, and we're fine with it. Boss deserves to be happy. But you gotta make it official, or men like Slate are gonna keep circling. Make it official. The words hung in the air. It's complicated, Maggie said weakly. It always is. Tucker tipped his hat. But complicated's better than regret. He walked away, leaving Maggie standing in the garden, her mind spinning. Josiah returned as the sun touched the mountains, riding hard, his face like thunder. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped, strode straight to Maggie. What happened? She told him. Everything. Slate's proposition, his veiled threats, the way his men had been armed and ready. Josiah's jaw worked. He touched you. No, Tucker intervened before. I'm going to kill him. Josiah, no. He threatened you on my land, in my garden, while I was gone. His voice was low, lethal. That's a line you don't cross. Violence will just make things worse. Things are already worse. He gripped her arms. Don't you see? He's not going to stop. Not until... He stopped, jaw clenching. Until what? Maggie whispered. Josiah's eyes burned into hers. Until you're protected. Really protected. In a way that makes it clear you're not available. Her breath caught. What are you saying? You know what I'm saying. Marriage. He was talking about marriage. The word hung unspoken between them. We barely know each other, Maggie said, but her voice shook. I know you'd die for your children. I know you're strong enough to walk through a blizzard and stubborn enough to wade into a flooding creek. I know you make the best biscuits I've ever tasted, and you hum when you think no one's listening. His hands tightened. I know when you smile, really smile, it feels like the sun coming out after a long winter. What else do I need to know? Tears blurred her vision. This is crazy. Probably. People will say we're only doing it for convenience, for protection. Let them. Josiah, marry me. The words were raw, unpolished. Not because of Slate, not because you need protecting. Marry me because when I thought you might have drowned, I realized I can't go back to half living. Marry me because I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here. Marry me because... His voice broke. Because I'm falling in love with you, he finished quietly. And I don't want to stop. The world tilted. Maggie stared at him, this man who'd saved her life, who'd given her children a home, who looked at her like she was something precious instead of broken. And she realized Clara was right. Esther was right. Tucker was right. She deserved to be happy, even if it terrified her. Ask me again, she whispered. Hope flared in his eyes. What? Ask me again, properly. Josiah dropped to one knee in the dirt, still holding her hand. Maggie Brennan, will you marry me? She looked down at him, this strong, wounded man who'd learned to hope again because of her. And she let herself fall. Yes. The word hung in the air between them, like a promise and a prayer. Josiah stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, and Maggie saw something in them she hadn't seen before, pure, unguarded joy. Say it again, he said, voice rough. Yes, I'll marry you. He pulled her into his arms, and this time she didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on, feeling his heart thunder against hers, feeling 8 years of loneliness and 18 months of grief crack open to let something new grow through. When he finally pulled back, His hands framed her face. "I won't let you regret this." "I already don't." He kissed her, then soft and careful, like she was something that might break. But Maggie had been broken before and survived it. She kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. Hope and fear, desperate fragile trust. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Josiah rested his forehead against hers. "How soon?" he asked. "How soon? What? How soon can we get married, because I don't want to give you time to change your mind?" She laughed, the sound startling her. When was the last time she'd laughed? "I'm not going to change my mind." "Good. Because I'm riding to town tomorrow and talking to Reverend Oakes." The mention of the Reverend sobered her. "He's not going to be happy about this." "Don't care. The town will talk. Let them." Josiah's jaw set. "I've spent 8 years living for other people's opinions, for what's proper and expected and safe. I'm done with that." "Josiah, you want to wait. Want a long engagement so people don't think we're rushing." Did she? Part of her, the part that still heard her mother's voice about propriety and reputation, said yes. But the larger part, the part that had walked through a blizzard and waded into a flooding creek, that had learned survival meant taking chances, said no. "I don't want to wait," she said. "But the children, Clara and Ben, they should be part of this decision." "You're right." He took her hand. "Let's talk to them." They found Clara and Ben in the kitchen with Esther, who took one look at their joined hands and faces and smiled. "Well, about damn time." "Esther," Maggie said, heat flooding her cheeks. "Don't Esther me. I got eyes." The older woman wiped her hands on her apron. "You two finally figure out what the rest of us knew months ago." "We're getting married," Josiah said simply. Ben's head snapped up. "Really? If it's all right with you and your sister." Clara stood slowly, her face unreadable. For a long moment she just looked at Josiah, and Maggie's heart clenched with fear that her daughter would object, would see this as a betrayal of Daniel's memory. Then Clara walked over and stood in front of Josiah. "You'll be good to her?" she asked. "To all of us?" "Yes." "You promise?" "I promise." Clara studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "Okay." Relief flooded Maggie. Ben launched himself at Josiah, wrapping his arms around his waist. "Does this mean you'll be our papa?" Josiah's hand came up to rest on Ben's head, and Maggie saw his throat work. "If you want me to be." "I want you to be." Ben looked up, eyes bright. "Can I call you Papa?" Josiah's eyes went shiny. He knelt down to Ben's level. "I'd be honored." "What about you?" Maggie asked Clara softly. "How do you feel about this?" Clara's jaw trembled. "Papa's gone. He's not coming back. And I miss him. I'll always miss him. But—" She looked at Josiah. "You saved us. You gave us a home when we had nothing. And you make Mama smile again. So yeah, I'm okay with it." Josiah held out his arm and Clara went to him. He pulled both children close, one arm around each, and looked at Maggie over their heads. This was her family now. Broken pieces fitted together into something new. "When's the wedding?" Esther asked. "Soon as Reverend Oakes will do it," Josiah said. "He's going to have opinions. He can keep them to himself." Esther laughed. "This is going to be interesting." The next morning, Josiah rode to town with Tucker. Maggie stayed behind, nerves eating at her stomach despite her certainty. What if the Reverend refused? What if the whole town rose up in scandal? What if Josiah changed his mind when faced with everyone's disapproval? "Stop pacing," Esther said from her chair by the fire. "You're making me dizzy." "I can't help it. He'll be back, and when he is, he'll have a wedding date." "You sound very sure." "Because I know Josiah McAllister. That man don't make promises he can't keep, and he promised to marry you, so he will." Maggie tried to take comfort in that. Tried to focus on the mending in her lap, but her hands shook too much to thread the needle. Hours crawled by. Then hoofbeats. Maggie ran to the window, saw Josiah and Tucker riding in. Josiah's face was stone. Her heart sank. He'd changed his mind. The Reverend had talked him out of it. The whole town had. Josiah came through the door, saw her face, and crossed the room in 3 strides. "Saturday," he said. She blinked. "What?" "We're getting married Saturday, 3 days from now." The Reverend agreed, after some persuading. Josiah's mouth tightened. He had concerns about the speed, about appearances, about proper mourning periods. I told him he could either marry us or we'd ride to the next county and find someone who would. "Josiah, I also told him that if he had questions about your character or mine, he could ask them to my face instead of hiding behind scripture." His eyes blazed. "He chose to marry us." Tucker appeared in the doorway grinning. "Boss also made a sizable donation to the church roof fund. That might have helped change the Reverend's mind." "You bribed him?" Maggie asked, caught between shock and laughter. "I made a charitable donation," Josiah corrected. "The timing was coincidental." "Uh-huh." Esther's voice was dry. "And I'm the Queen of England." 3 days. Maggie repeated, the reality hitting her. "That's so soon." "Too soon." Josiah's hand found hers. "We can wait if you need—" "No." She gripped his fingers. "No 3 days is perfect. It's just, I don't have a dress, or flowers, or—" "You don't need any of that. Every bride needs a dress." Esther stood. "I got Sarah's wedding dress packed away. If you're comfortable wearing it—" She stopped looking at Josiah. His face had gone still. "Sarah's dress. She'd want it used," Esther said gently. "Hate to see it just sitting in a trunk when it could make someone happy." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Show her." Esther led Maggie upstairs to a room Maggie had never entered. It was clearly Josiah's, but frozen in time, a woman's brush still on the dresser, a faded quilt on the bed. From the wardrobe, Esther pulled a trunk. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a dress. Cream-colored silk, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and sleeves. "It's beautiful," Maggie whispered. "Try it on." Maggie stripped down to her chemise, and Esther helped her into the dress. It fit almost perfectly, just a touch long. "I can hem it," Esther said. "You look lovely." Maggie turned to the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the starving widow who'd walked through a blizzard. Wasn't the desperate mother willing to give up her children. She looked like a bride. Like someone beginning instead of ending. "Do you think she'd mind?" Maggie asked quietly. "Sarah, do you think she'd mind me wearing her dress, marrying her husband?" Esther's hand rested on her shoulder. Sarah loved Josiah more than her own life, and when she was dying she made me promise something. Maggie turned. "What?" "She made me promise that if Josiah ever found someone else, someone who could make him happy again, I wouldn't let him sabotage it out of guilt." Esther's eyes were wet. She said he deserved to live, not just exist. That loving him meant wanting him to be happy, even if it was with someone else. Tears spilled down Maggie's cheeks. "So no," Esther said firmly. "Sarah wouldn't mind. She'd be grateful." That night, Maggie couldn't sleep. She stood at her window looking out at the ranch bathed in starlight and thought about Daniel. "I hope you'd understand," she whispered to the darkness. "I hope you'd want this for me, for the kids. I'll never forget you, Danny, but I can't keep living in the past." The wind rustled the curtains, and for a moment she imagined she felt his presence. Not angry or hurt, just peaceful, letting go. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me Clara and Ben, for the good years we had, for saving Tucker so that Josiah would feel indebted and take us in. Maybe you're still watching out for us, even now." The next morning, word spread through town like wildfire. Josiah McAllister was marrying the widow Brennan. Saturday, at the church. The town erupted. Mrs. Henderson told anyone who'd listen that it was scandalous the widow barely in mourning. Clearly, she'd been angling for this all along. Mr. Foster said it was McAllister's business, but mighty quick, wasn't it? The general store owner took bets on whether the marriage would last a year. And Victor Slate heard the news and smiled. Friday afternoon, the day before the wedding, Maggie was in the garden when a wagon rolled up. Not Slate this time. A woman climbed down, middle-aged and stern-faced, with clothes on a Friday. Mrs. Brennan. Yes. I'm Dorothy Slate, Victor's wife. Ice slid through Maggie's veins. I don't want any trouble, Mrs. Slate. Neither do I. That's why I'm here. Dorothy looked around as if checking for listeners. My husband is planning something, tomorrow, at your wedding. Maggie's blood ran cold. What kind of something? I don't know exactly, but I heard him talking to his men. Something about making a scene, proving that McAllister's marriage is a sham. She hesitated. He's obsessed with bringing Josiah down. Has been for years, ever since McAllister outbid him on a land deal. Why are you telling me this? Dorothy's eyes were sad. Because I know what it's like to love a hard man, to make a life with someone who's difficult and closed off. And I know what it's like when that man finally finds happiness again. She glanced toward the house. Don't let Victor ruin this for you. Be ready tomorrow. Have people watching, and whatever happens, don't let him provoke Josiah into violence. That's what he wants. A reason to call the sheriff to press charges to take Thunder Creek in a lawsuit. Why would you warn me if your husband... My husband is a bitter, angry man who's let jealousy poison him. But I'm not. Dorothy climbed back into her wagon. Congratulations on your wedding, Mrs. Brennan. I hope you'll be happy. She drove away, leaving Maggie shaking. She ran to find Josiah, found him in the barn with Tucker. Slate's planning something tomorrow, she said breathlessly. At the wedding. Dorothy came to warn me. Josiah's face went hard. What kind of something? She didn't know. But he wants to provoke you. Make you lose your temper. Get you arrested. Then we cancel, Josiah said immediately. Move the wedding. Do it here private, just us. No. The word came out fierce. No. I'm not letting him control our lives. We're getting married tomorrow in that church like we planned. Maggie. I'm done running, done hiding, done letting fear make my decisions. She gripped his arms. We'll be careful. We'll be ready. But we're not giving him this. Tucker cleared his throat. If I'm a boss, we could have the hands there. Armed but discreet. Anyone makes trouble, we handle it quiet-like. Josiah looked at Maggie. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Something in his eyes softened. All right, we do it your way. But at the first sign of trouble, we handle it together, Maggie said. That's what marriage means, right? His mouth curved. Yeah, that's what it means. That night, Maggie lay in bed too keyed up to sleep. Tomorrow she'd marry Josiah. Tomorrow she'd become Mrs. McAllister. Tomorrow her life would change forever. Fear and excitement warred in her chest. A soft knock at her door. Mama. Clara's voice. Come in, baby. Clara slipped inside, climbed into bed beside her mother. Can't sleep either. No. Are you scared about tomorrow? Maggie thought about it. A little, but more excited than scared. I think Papa would like Mr. McAllister, Clara said quietly. They're both good men, both the kind who do what's right even when it's hard. Yeah, I think he would too. Do you love him, Mr. McAllister? The question hung in the darkness. I do, Maggie said softly. Not the same way I loved your papa, but just as real, just as deep. Good. Clara snuggled closer. Because he loves you too, I can tell. How? The way he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're the answer to something he forgot he was asking. Maggie's throat tightened. When did you get so wise? When I had to grow up fast. Clara's voice was matter of fact, But that's okay. Growing up means I get to see you happy again. That makes it worth it." Maggie held her daughter close and let the tears come. Saturday dawned clear and bright, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Esther dressed Maggie in Sarah's wedding dress, now perfectly hemmed. Clara wore a new dress Josiah had bought, pale yellow, that made her look young again. Ben wore a suit that was a bit too big, but he kept tugging at the collar with pride. "You look beautiful, Mama," Clara said. Maggie looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was thin still, but healthy, fed, whole, ready. They rode to town in the wagon, Tucker driving, 4 ranch hands riding alongside. Not obvious, but clearly there. The church sat at the edge of Willow Springs' white clapboard with a small bell tower. People gathered outside, more than Maggie expected. Some curious, some supportive, some clearly disapproving. And in the back, on horseback, Victor Slate and 6 of his men. Maggie's heart hammered. Tucker helped her down, and she saw Josiah waiting at the church steps. He wore a black suit, his hair combed back, his face clean-shaven. He looked like a stranger, and exactly like himself all at once. When he saw her, his eyes widened. She walked toward him, Clara and Ben behind her, and the crowd parted. Whispers rose like wind through grass. "Can't believe he's going through with it." "Widow's barely cold in her mourning clothes." "Scandalous, that's what it is." Maggie kept her chin high, her eyes on Josiah. He met her halfway, offered his arm. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. "Are you?" "Been ready since you said yes." They walked into the church together. Reverend Oakes stood at the altar, his face carefully neutral. The church was packed, ranch hands, townspeople, the curious and the cruel, all mixed together. Maggie and Josiah stood before the Reverend, Clara and Ben beside them. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Oakes began. The doors slammed open. Victor Slate strode in, his men behind him. "I object," he announced. The church erupted in gasps and whispers. Josiah's hand tightened on Maggie's, but his voice stayed calm. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that this marriage is a fraud," Slate's voice carried across the church. "This woman has been living at your ranch for months, unmarried, unchaperoned. You expect us to believe this is some pure romance? Or is it something else? A business arrangement, payment for services rendered." Fury flooded Maggie hot and sharp. But before Josiah could move, before Tucker could reach for his gun, before the whole thing could explode into violence, Maggie stepped forward. "You're right," she said clearly. The church went silent. Josiah stared at her. "Maggie." "No, let me." She turned to face the congregation, face burning, but voice steady. "Mr. Slate is right. This isn't some fairy tale romance. I did come to Thunder Creek desperate and starving. I did beg Josiah to save my children. And yes, I've been living at his ranch." Slate smiled triumphant. "But here's what Mr. Slate doesn't understand," Maggie continued. "Desperation doesn't make love less real. It makes it more real. I didn't fall in love with Josiah because he's rich or powerful. I fell in love with him because when I had nothing, when the whole town turned its back on me." She looked at the congregation, saw guilty faces look away. "When I was dying and my children were dying, he didn't ask what he'd get out of helping. He just helped." She turned back to Josiah, her voice softening. "I fell in love with him because he's kind without being soft, strong without being cruel. Because he kneels in the dirt to look at a 6-year-old's rock collection. Because he sits up all night bottle-feeding a rejected calf. Because he loved his wife so deeply that he thought he'd never love again until he learned that hearts are bigger than we think. That there's room for old grief and new joy both." Tears streaked her cheeks now. "So yes, this marriage started in desperation. But it's ending in love. Real, honest, imperfect love. And if that offends you..." She looked at Slate. "Then you've never known what it's like to lose everything and have someone help you find it again." Silence. Then Esther started clapping. One pair of hands loud in the quiet church. Tucker joined her. Then the ranch hands. then slowly others in the congregation. Slate's face went purple. "This is ridiculous." "The only thing ridiculous here is you." Josiah's voice cut through the applause. "You rode into a church, on a wedding day, to insult a woman who's done nothing but survive. That tell you something about your character, Slate. I'm trying to protect this town from people being happy, from second chances." Josiah stepped forward. "You want to ruin this for me, because I outbid you on a land deal 5 years ago. That's what this is really about." Slate's jaw worked. "Get out," Josiah said quietly. "Get out of this church. Get off my land. And if you ever threaten Maggie or her children again, there won't be enough law in Montana to protect you." "You threatening me? I'm making a promise." For a long moment, Slate held Josiah's stare. Then he turned on his heel and stalked out, his men following. The church exhaled. Reverend Oakes cleared his throat. "Well, shall we continue?" Josiah turned to Maggie, his eyes searching hers. "You meant all that, every word." He cupped her face, kissed her in front of God and everyone, and the church erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the Reverend said dryly, "I generally wait until after the vows for that part." Laughter rippled through the congregation. They spoke their vows, simple traditional words that meant everything. "I, Josiah, take you, Maggie. I, Maggie, take you, Josiah. Till death do us part." The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Josiah kissed her again, softer this time, a promise for all the tomorrows ahead. They walked out of the church together into brilliant sunshine, and Maggie thought about how she'd walked through a blizzard to this moment, how close she'd come to giving up, how glad she was that she hadn't. Because here now, with Josiah's hand in hers, and her children beside her, and a whole future stretching out bright and uncertain and beautiful, she understood something she'd forgotten in all those months of starving and surviving. Life could be hard and still be worth living. Love could grow from desperation and still be real. And sometimes the best things came from the worst moments, if you were brave enough to reach for them. The reception happened in the churchyard, tables laden with food the townspeople had brought, despite their earlier gossip. Maggie stood beside Josiah, his arm around her waist, and watched people who'd turned her away months ago now smile and offer congratulations. Some of it was genuine. Some wasn't. She found she didn't care either way. "You were incredible in there," Josiah said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "The way you stood up to Slate, the things you said. I meant them. I know you did. That's what made it incredible." He turned her to face him, his hands on her waist. "You didn't need me to defend you. You defended yourself." "We're partners now," Maggie said. "That means fighting our own battles sometimes. And sometimes fighting them together. Yes, together." Mrs. Henderson approached, her face pinched with something between shame and obligation. "Mrs. McAllister, congratulations." The name still felt strange. Mrs. McAllister. Not Mrs. Brennan anymore. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I hope—" The older woman faltered. "I hope you'll be very happy." What she didn't say hung in the air. "I'm sorry I turned you away. Sorry I let you starve. Sorry I chose comfort over compassion." Maggie could hold on to the anger, could throw those closed doors back in her face, or she could let it go. "I appreciate that," she said simply. Mrs. Henderson nodded, relieved, and moved away. "You're more forgiving than I'd be," Josiah muttered. "I'm not forgiving. I'm just done carrying that weight." Maggie looked up at him. "We're starting fresh, all of us. That means leaving the past where it belongs." His eyes searched hers. "Even Daniel?" The question didn't hurt the way it might have months ago. "Daniel will always be part of me. He gave me Clara and Ben. He taught me what it meant to build a life with someone." She touched Josiah's face. "But you taught me that life doesn't end when love dies, that hearts are bigger than we think, that there's room for both grief and joy." Josiah pulled her closer. "I love you, Maggie McAllister." "I love you too." They kissed, and around them the reception continued, life flowing forward, the way it always did, carrying them with it. Ben tugged on Josiah's coat. "Papa, can I have more cake?" Josiah grinned a real full smile that transformed his whole face. "Yeah, son, you can have more cake." Maggie's heart swelled watching them, this man, who'd been so closed off, now kneeling to cut a slice for her boy. Their boy. Clara appeared at her side. "You happy, Mama?" "Yeah, baby. I'm happy." "Good." Clara squeezed her hand. "You deserve it." The afternoon stretched long and golden, full of laughter and music, and people dancing in the churchyard. Maggie danced with Josiah, his hand warm in hers, moving to a fiddle's tune, while the sun dipped toward the mountains. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For helping when no one else would. For giving us a home." "You gave me something too," Josiah said quietly. "What?" "A reason to stop just surviving and start living again." They danced until the shadows grew long, until the guests started drifting home, until only the ranch hands and Esther remained helping clean up. Tucker approached, grinning. "Boss, Mrs. McAllister, we got the wagon ready whenever you want to head home." Home. Thunder Creek Ranch was home now. Not just a place she worked, but truly home. They loaded the children into the wagon, both drowsy from excitement and cake. Esther climbed in beside them, and Josiah helped Maggie up before taking the reins. As they pulled away from the church, Maggie looked back once. There at the edge of the yard stood Reverend Oakes. He raised his hand in farewell, his expression thoughtful. She waved back, then turned to face forward, toward home, toward the future. The ride back was quiet, peaceful. Ben fell asleep against Esther's shoulder. Clara leaned against Maggie, her eyes drifting closed. The ranch hands rode ahead and behind, protective even now. Josiah's free hand found Maggie's, their fingers intertwining. "You tired?" he asked. "Not really. Too much to think about." "Like what?" "Like how different today is from 6 months ago. How much has changed." "Regret any of it?" She thought about walking through the blizzard, nearly frozen, desperate enough to offer up her children. Thought about the terror of watching Ben in the creek, the shame of begging for help, the fear of hoping again. "No," she said. "I don't regret any of it, because it brought me here, to you, to this." Josiah lifted her hand, kissed her knuckles. "We're going to make this work, Maggie. Build something good, something that lasts." "I know we will." Thunder Creek Ranch appeared on the horizon, lights glowing warm in the growing dusk. Smoke curled from the chimneys. Horses moved in the corrals. Everything looked the same as it had this morning. Everything was completely different. They pulled up to the house, and the ranch hands appeared to help unload. "Congratulations again, boss," one of them said, tipping his hat. "Ma'am." "Thank you, James." Esther carried Ben inside while Clara followed, yawning. Josiah helped Maggie down, but instead of heading for the door, he held her there in the yard. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Just looking at you." "Why?" "Because you're my wife now. Still getting used to that." "Me too." She touched his face. "Josiah McAllister's wife. Never thought I'd be standing here like this." "Neither did I." His arms came around her. "But I'm grateful you are." They stood there as stars began to appear, holding each other, while around them the ranch settled into evening rhythms. Inside, Esther got the children ready for bed. Maggie helped tucking Ben in, then Clara. "Good night, Mrs. McAllister," Clara said with a small smile. "Good night, baby." "I'm glad you married him, Mama. Papa would be glad too." Maggie's throat tightened. "You think so?" "I know so. Papa always said the best thing about loving someone was wanting them to be happy, even when you couldn't be the one to make them happy anymore." Clara's eyes were serious. "I think he's happy you found someone who can." Maggie kissed her forehead, unable to speak past the tears. When she came downstairs, Josiah was waiting by the fire. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and stood staring into the flames. "They settled?" he asked. "Yeah, both asleep already." He turned to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Come here," he said softly. She went to him, and he pulled her into his arms. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About how close I came to never meeting you. If Daniel hadn't saved Tucker, if you'd given up before making that walk, if I'd been less stubborn about paying debts." His hand cupped her face. "So many things had to go exactly right for us to end up here." "Or exactly wrong," Maggie said, "depending on how you look at it." "No, right." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Because you're here. Because we're here. Because I get to spend the rest of my life with you." "That's a long time." "Not long enough." He kissed her then deeper than before, and she tasted promise in it. Promise and passion and a future full of mornings waking up beside him, of building a life together, of watching their children grow. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Josiah rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Want to honor what we both lost. Want to build something new without forgetting what came before." "We will," Maggie said. "Together." "Together," he echoed. They stood by the fire as the house settled around them, the warmth seeping into their bones, and Maggie thought about all the ways love could surprise you, how it could grow in the darkest places, how desperation could transform into devotion, how two broken people could fit together into something whole. The next morning, Maggie woke in Josiah's arms. Sunlight streamed through the window. The room smelled like coffee and wood smoke. Somewhere downstairs, Esther was clattering pots and children's voices drifted up through the floorboards. Normal, domestic, beautiful. Josiah stirred, his eyes opening. When he saw her, he smiled. "Morning, wife?" "Morning, husband." "Sleep well." "Better than I have in years." He pulled her closer. "Get used to it." They lay there a while longer, neither wanting to move, until Ben's voice floated up the stairs. "Papa, Mama, come see, the calf is standing." Josiah laughed. "Duty calls." They dressed and went downstairs to find Ben and Clara in the kitchen, already eating breakfast. "The calf stood up all by himself," Ben announced proudly. "Tucker said it's because we took good care of him." "That's wonderful," Maggie said, kissing the top of his head. Over the next weeks, life settled into new patterns. Maggie still worked alongside Esther, but now as mistress of the house, rather than hired help. She learned the ranch accounts from Josiah sitting beside him in his office while he showed her the ledgers. "You should know all this," he said, "in case something happens to me." "Nothing's going to happen to you." "You can't know that. Range work is dangerous. I want you to be able to run this place if you need to." So she learned. The investments, the livestock numbers, the contracts with buyers in Chicago. Her head for figures surprised him. "You're good at this," he said. "I kept books for Daniel. It's not so different, just bigger numbers." Clara took to ranch life like she was born to it, helping with the accounts, learning to ride, asking questions about breeding stock and water rights. Ben spent his days with Tucker, learning to rope and brand and read the weather. They grew stronger, healthier, their laughter filling the house. And Maggie bloomed. She'd been so focused on survival for so long, she'd forgotten what it meant to simply live. To wake without dread, to eat without rationing, to plan for the future instead of just enduring the present. One evening, a month after the wedding, she stood in the garden watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. Josiah came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how scared I was. Walking through that blizzard to ask for your help. How certain I was that I'd be turned away. And if I had turned you away." She leaned back against him. "I don't know. I try not to think about it." "I almost did," he said quietly. She turned in his arms. "What?" "When Tucker first brought you to me, I almost said no. Almost told him to give you food and send you on your way. His jaw tightened. I didn't want the complication. Didn't want to let anyone close enough to hurt me again. What changed your mind? Your eyes. The way you looked at me when you asked me to take your children. Like you were offering me your heart on a blade. He touched her face. I saw myself in you. Saw what grief does, how it hollows you out. And I thought if I turn her away, I'm no better than the death that took Sarah. Just another force that destroys instead of saves. Maggie's throat ached. I'm glad you didn't turn me away. So am I. They stood there as the light faded, holding each other, while around them the ranch hummed with life. Spring turned to summer. The calves grew strong. The grass turned green. Clara turned 10, and they celebrated with cake and gifts and laughter. Ben learned to ride without help, and Josiah's pride was so obvious it made Maggie's heart swell. They were a family. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and whole and theirs. One night in July, Maggie stood in the bedroom she now shared with Josiah, looking at herself in the mirror. Her body had changed, filled out with regular meals, softened with happiness, and now changed in another way. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the slight swell there. She'd suspected for weeks, been certain for days. Tonight she'd tell him. Josiah came in tired from a long day moving cattle. He started to shrug off his shirt, then stopped, seeing her expression. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Then why do you look scared? She took a breath. Because I don't know how you'll feel about this. He crossed to her concern written on his face. About what? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air. Josiah went utterly still. His eyes dropped to her stomach, then back to her face. You're sure? Yes. For a long moment, he didn't react, didn't speak. Fear spiked through her. Say something. Sarah died in childbirth, he said, voice hollow. The baby too. I held them both while they... He stopped, turned away. I can't do that again, Maggie. I can't watch you die. She went to him, gripped his arms. I'm not Sarah, and this isn't the same. You don't know that. Women die in childbirth all the time. Strong women, healthy women. And many don't. Many live and have healthy babies and build families. She forced him to look at her. I'm scared too, but I'm also happy and hopeful, because this baby is ours, yours and mine, a symbol of everything we've built together. His jaw worked. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll face it together, the same way we've faced everything else. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are. We are. She placed his hand on her stomach. This is our future, Josiah, our baby. Are you going to let fear steal that from us? He closed his eyes, his hand pressing gently against her belly. I'm terrified, he whispered. Me too, but I'm more excited than terrified. She covered his hand with hers. We're going to be all right, all of us. Finally, slowly, he pulled her into his arms. A baby, he said, wonder creeping into his voice. Our baby. Clara and Ben, how will they feel? They'll be thrilled. Ben's been asking for a little brother. Josiah laughed, the sound shaky but real. When? February, I think. He held her tighter. February. Middle of winter. We'll manage. Yeah. His voice steadied. Yeah, we will. They told the children the next morning. Ben whooped and immediately started making plans. I'll teach him to ride and rope and... It might be a girl, Clara pointed out. Then I'll teach her to ride and rope. Clara's smile was quieter, but just as real. A baby. That's good, Mama. You're sure? Maggie asked. You're all right with this? Yeah, it means we're really a family now. Not just pieces put together, but something whole. Esther cried when they told her, which shocked everyone because Esther never cried. About time, she said, wiping her eyes. This house needs a baby in it again. The months passed in a blur of preparations. Josiah became impossibly protective, hovering whenever Maggie lifted anything heavier than a spoon. She alternated between being touched and annoyed. I'm made of glass. I know. You're worried, I know. She took his hand. But you have to trust me. Trust this. He tried. Some days were easier than others. In October, Victor Slate's ranch went under. Rumors said he'd over-leveraged, made bad deals, gambled on cattle prices, and lost. Whatever the reason, he was forced to sell. Josiah bought the land. Why? Maggie asked. Because it borders ours, because it makes sense, and because... He hesitated. Because I want our children to inherit something solid, something that can't be taken away by drought or bad luck or vindictive neighbors. Our children. Plural now. Maggie kissed him. You're going to be a wonderful father. I already am, he said, thinking of Clara and Ben. But this is different. I know. Winter came hard and early. Snow buried the ranch in December. The cattle huddled in the new barns. The horses grew shaggy coats, and Maggie grew rounder, slower, more uncomfortable. Clara helped her with everything. Ben fetched and carried. Josiah barely let her out of his sight. You're driving me crazy, she told him one night in January. I don't care. I'm not taking chances. Josiah. No. He pulled her close as her belly would allow. I lost Sarah because I wasn't there. I was out on the range and she went into labor early, and by the time I got back, his voice cracked. I won't make that mistake again. You didn't make a mistake. You couldn't have known. Doesn't matter. I wasn't there. This time, I will be. So he stayed close, and Maggie learned to accept it, learned to see it for what it was. Love showing up as fear, because loss had taught him that happiness was fragile. On February 12th, just after midnight, Maggie's water broke. Josiah sent Tucker flying to town for the doctor while he helped Maggie to bed, his hands shaking. It's all right, she said, gripping his hand through a contraction. This is normal. Nothing about this feels normal. Esther appeared with hot water and clean cloths, her face calm and competent. The labor was long, painful. Maggie lost track of time, lost track of everything except the waves of pain and Josiah's hand in hers and his voice in her ear. You're doing so good. So good, Maggie. Just breathe. I am breathing. I know, you're incredible. So strong. Hours blurred together. The doctor arrived, examined her, said everything was progressing normally. Dawn broke. The pain intensified until Maggie thought she'd break from it. Then the doctor said, one more push. She pushed, screaming, and suddenly, a baby's cry filled the room. It's a girl, the doctor announced. Maggie collapsed back, gasping. Josiah's face was wet with tears. A girl. We have a daughter. The doctor cleaned the baby, wrapped her in a blanket, placed her in Maggie's arms. She was tiny. Perfect. Dark hair, red face, lungs, like a cattle auctioneer. Hello, sweetheart, Maggie whispered. Josiah knelt beside the bed, touching the baby's hand with one finger. His daughter's tiny fist wrapped around it. She's beautiful, he breathed. She is. What should we name her? Maggie looked at him. Sarah, if that's all right with you. Josiah's face crumpled. You'd do that? She's part of our story, part of what brought us together. I want to honor that. He kissed Maggie's forehead, then the baby's. Sarah Hope McAllister. Hope. Because that's what you gave me, what she represents. Clara and Ben were allowed in, both wide-eyed and awed. She's so small, Ben whispered. You were this small once, Maggie said. Clara touched the baby's hand gently. Hi, Sarah. I'm your big sister. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and Maggie looked around at her family, Josiah beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Clara and Ben crowded close, Esther beaming in the doorway. This new life cradled in her arms and felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. She'd walked through a blizzard to beg for help, had been ready to give up everything to save her children, had lost one love and found another, had learned that endings could become beginnings if you were brave enough to keep walking. "Thank you," she said to Josiah. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for taking us in when we had nothing, for loving me even when I was too scared to love you back." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for walking through that blizzard, for being stubborn enough to survive, for giving me a reason to live instead of just exist." Outside, the February wind howled across the Montana plains, but inside Thunder Creek Ranch, warmth filled every corner. A family built from broken pieces, a love born from desperation and transformed into devotion, a future stretching out bright and uncertain and beautiful. Maggie Brennan had walked into a blizzard, ready to sacrifice everything. Maggie McAllister held her daughter and understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not give up, but reach for hope, even when hope seems impossible. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to ask for help, when you're desperate enough to risk everything, when you're strong enough to keep walking, even when the cold bites and the path is dark. Sometimes you find exactly what you didn't know you were searching for. Not just survival, but life. Not just existence, but love. Not just an ending, but a beginning that makes every painful step worth taking.